Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folani. Hope you had a great weekend, and it's Monday morning, and so to work. Well, the situation in Sudan, the fighting that's been going on in Sudan that has made everyone's life there a misery, all efforts to, have talks that would sort of lead to something of a breakthrough. So far, we hear that those talks haven't yielded much fruit. So we thought we'd look today at the situation in Sudan and the growing humanitarian crisis that the world is facing, especially those that are in Sudan, and especially those that are sort of like expatriates in Sudan. Nigeria is among that number. Happily, we began to get some of our people back. But it still is a harrowing story. Now, to talk with us this morning about this subject matter, we have Professor Babafemi Badejo, an ex-staff of the UN Mission in Darfur, Sudan. A fine morning to you, Prof.
Yes, very good morning to you too.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for making time for us. And we also have in our Lagos studio Dr. Dan Ekere. He's a lecturer in the philosophy department of the University of Lagos, but I didn't need to tell you that he's such a frequent guest on our program that you knew that already. Good morning to you, Dr. Ekere.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
Again, our pleasure. We're smiling now, but it's a harrowing situation that's been going on in Sudan. And let me take it first to Prof, especially Prof having been in the UN mission in Darfur, Sudan. This we know it's a harrowing story. We hear pictures, but it's probably really a bit more than harrowing. It's a matter of life or death to those that are in there. Your overview, sir, of the dire situation that we are in now, that the world is in now, in Sudan.
Well, it is extremely a dire situation for many people. The Sudanese, principally, given the fact that they are in their country and very few of them are able to have the alternatives that are being offered to foreigners in Sudan. Of course, there are foreigners that have sizable population in there. You must have been listening to the fact of the arrangements being made to evacuate Yemenis and Syrians from Port Sudan to Saudi Arabia. These were people who fled from the crisis in their respective countries, and because the Sudanese were very welcoming, especially to these Arabs, they have them in quite a sizable number, and they are being evacuated. In our situation, quite a number of our students, especially from the northern part of Nigeria, where there has been a pre-independence relationship that is very deep with the Sudan, are going to study in the universities in Sudan, and they are the ones that are being evacuated now. I don't know how many as at today, but the figure is approaching 1,000, but maybe many more. In a war situation, you are not sure if you're going to live or die because people are throwing bombs as they like. The combatants are wild, and they do whatever they like with people in terms of seizing their products, and people tend to hide in their houses. No electricity, no water. I was asking one of my colleagues, a Sudanese, to watch this program, and he responded with, what a great topic that has been chosen, but we have no light to watch it.
Oh dear.
It was insensitive on my part to even have not remembered that in this kind of a situation, who's going to be generating electricity when you don't know if you will die or live from going to work and coming back. Then medicine. There are people who can no longer go to the hospitals. There are doctors who dared not go out and show that they are doctors because they will be conscripted immediately by either side of the combatants to come and take care of their own wounded. And medicine becoming scarce in terms of availability. These are several humanitarian problems that the world is facing, but it's not going to be limited to Sudan if we wait for too long. It's going to affect Nigeria. It's going to affect South Sudan. It's going to affect Ethiopia. It's going to affect Egypt. It's going to affect many of those neighbors. And if Libya went as far as Mali in terms of the destabilization that took place in Libya, you should be rest assured that this is not going to end, given the long relationship that we have with Sudan. The humanitarian situation, when it's very, very dire for the Lake Chad region, will spill off into several other problems, conflictual also, humanitarian, that we will have to deal with, either in terms of the movement of weapons or whatever. So there is a need to have a holistic look at the humanitarian situation.
Well, thank you very much, Prof, for that opening bird's eye view of the dire situation. And Dan Ekere in studio, as we've just heard, Sudan is a center of learning, long been so, especially on the Islamic side of town. So long have our nationals been going there in the quest for learning. Now, Prof also hinted at this situation is in Sudan. North Sudan is a totally, they're sort of okay now. But people say, what is going on in Sudan? Is it a civil war? Well, one can't call it a civil war. I don't know. There's the National Army, and then there's the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, and these people are fighting, and it's become so as dangerous as Prof just painted out. Talk a bit, if you will, around that whole matter of the National Army in conflict with the Rapid Support Forces leading to all of this crisis.
Thank you. The situation in Sudan is indeed very worrisome, I must confess. Very worrisome.
And could spread.
Not could spread. It's already spreading. Look at the people you are moving. When you talk about evacuating people from Sudan and the rest of it, you could see the stress the various countries that are evacuating their citizens are going through. How much has been spent on evacuation? We understood that just to hire a bus, well, in the case of Nigeria, will cost how many thousands of dollars? And that alone, no Nigerian earns as much as $30,000 as a minimum wage. So if beyond the minimum wage is being used to just hire a bus, and the people who are being moved are going to be cared for and all of that, and it's not just one bus, then the risk involved as well, so many things are involved. So to say that it has not spread will be, just trying to be mild with words, because already it's affecting them. Apart from that, like Prof rightly said, there's going to be huge humanitarian crisis.
Yes.
Very huge. You see, the way this thing is going, I've listened to a lot of speakers talking about the need for African Union and even Nigeria in particular to rise to the occasion to provide leadership and the rest of it. It is really critical, because it's like saying that you see an old plantain leaf falling and the grain is celebrating. That is not my tongue. You get it?
Yes.
That's the way this thing is. It is Sudan. But the effect will spread so wide. It's going to affect almost the entire continent of Africa. And that is the more reason why we need to wake up now. The need is no longer going to be proactive because lives are being wasted. And now the challenge is those who are fighting, whose interests are they protecting?
That's a very confusing issue.
Whose interest? Some are saying, okay, one is a national army, the other one is a rebel group. National to what extent? How national is this army? How national is that group? To what extent have they been able to show that indeed they are of national interest? So what interest is the other one fighting to protect? So you can see that the failure of leadership has been a major challenge. And it's not just in Sudan. This is a very serious matter in Africa. Because we copy all manner of models of, politics, governance, and all the rest, things that we are not rooted in, things that we are not properly trained to do, and we just jump into them. At the end of the day, what comes out is that we become more self-serving than ever before. And at the end of the day, some others will want to come in to see how they can as well protect their interests. But today, two groups are fighting. If you ask those soldiers but it's normal with soldiers, where by their training, all you do is give instructions and they go. Otherwise, if you ask, what exactly are you fighting for? I'm sure there are a lot of them who will tell you they don't even know what they are doing.
Exactly.
Yes, because at the end of it all, somebody is just pushing some persons to fight, to kill, just to protect an interest. Just so at the end of it, you will see that some will be smiling to the banks at the cost of lives. And I think that is really very unfortunate. So Africans need to rise, particularly the African Union, Nigeria too. We need to provide that leadership to show, because at the end of the day, already our students are coming back.
Exactly.
And I heard Bike Dabiri saying that we have up to 3 million to how many Nigerians there. The one we are talking about, they are just students. There are other Nigerians who are there.
Who
how
are not
Nigerians,
students.
yes,
Yes.
who are into businesses and all the rest. You know how Nigerians move. So I would be surprised if some are already casualties. So we really need to do something. How do we value lives in Africa? Of what value is life to African leadership, whatever? It's really challenging.
Okay. Prof, there are those who are looking at the crisis in Sudan as something of a failure of leadership. Even in the few minutes of this program, we've mentioned the African Union, we've mentioned we've mentioned Nigeria, for its place in especially in the West African sub-region. So how would one explain it very, very simply if there's the army there, call them the National Army, and they're being taken on by a rapid support force? I don't know if we are to call that the rebel group. So what actually is the bone of contention, if it is at all clear enough to express simply?
Well, I have been suggesting for a while now a comprehensive way of trying to make a clarity of political situation anywhere. And that is to look at governance, and governance involves analyzing the leadership and the level of corruption, then to look at external dynamics that are in contention in the particular country you are trying to analyze, to look at the nature of institution building, because individuals end up acting through institutions, and to look at availability of resources. Okay. Those things are the situational foundations for other things like peace and security, development, human rights, respect for it, humanitarianism, in terms of being able to survive in that situation. When you take a totality of this, then you might be able to make a sense of what was happening in Sudan. The leadership deficit in Sudan is very clear. Omar al-Bashir was in charge for decades. And Omar al-Bashir, when he was feeling that he could no longer totally rely on the armed forces, he created what he called the Rapid Support Forces. But the Rapid Support Forces were, at the beginning, the Arabs that were on horseback that were called Janjaweed. And he put them under Hemeti, got them well trained by people like Al-Burhan, working with Hemeti. And you then had a bifurcated military force. It's not correct to be talking about National Army and a rebel group. No, Rapid Support Forces is not a rebel group. It was created and empowered to be a fallback position if the military were to try to overthrow Omar al-Bashir. But the people went on the road and the people clamored for their freedom. And during that period, it became very clear that Omar al-Bashir was no longer sustainable. As a result of that, the Hemeti, who was heading the Rapid Support Forces, and the army side reached an agreement that it was time for Omar al-Bashir to go, and al-Burhan would be the head of the setup, and Hemeti, General Dagalo, the head of Rapid Support Forces, will be number 2. And of course, conceded an initial position to a civilian, a friend and colleague that was taken from the United Nations to become the Prime Minister of Sudan. Of course, he was also overthrown and it became largely a military affair when it was clear that the military were not going. So you then had 2 leaders in contention, both having formidable forces, and those forces being reinforced by external interests that may surprise you. And some of those external interests are even now talking about negotiating peace for them, which is a ruse. But okay, let's leave that for now. But so when you look at the totality of what's ongoing, then you know that you are facing state collapse if care is not taken. And when you have state collapse, it stops being, go and bring me your leader, because there are several leaders popping up, several warlords taking charge of different portions, and the command structure is already broken into 2. So you don't have a single army that's able to deal with a rebel force. So we need to put some of this in perspective in understanding what we are facing. Yes, you have been talking about African Union and what Nigeria.
The role of Nigeria.
Do the parties care about African Union and IGAD?
Wow.
What respect do they have for IGAD and the African Union? So those are the issues that we first, and I don't think if I can answer my question, I don't think they really care about whatever is happening with a set of poor countries. They look down on South Sudan all along before South Sudan got its independence, and we are now expecting that all of a sudden they will go to Juba and have peace. And of course, that broke down in spite of the effort, because it's not for not trying. IGAD put together President Omar Gele of Djibouti, as well as Salva Kiir, as well as the president of Kenya, William Ruto, for the 3 of them to go talk sense to these people. But they don't give a damn about these Africans coming to solve a problem between them. How much money do those ones have? How much clout worldwide do those ones have to make a difference in ensuring that they talk seriously? And even those who have clout, what are their interests?
Yes.
Is their interest to allow the situation to remain as it is? The last, currently they are in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia to talk about humanitarian ceasefire, not political ceasefire, not political agreement, humanitarian, to allow those who are in trouble in different parts of the country to be able to move and some aid to come in. Of course, it is possible that you can go forward from that to a political ceasefire that leads to further negotiation. I hope that that can be achieved, but I'm not optimistic given the parties, both the internal parties, the external parties who are appearing to be wanting to help realize peace. And in a way, it's never possible for them to speak with one voice. African Union is irrelevant in all this.
Oh,
African
yeah.
Union hasn't even had its Peace and Security Council in trying to deal with. And what leverage is African Union having? What leverage is anybody even having? Because you threaten them that you are going to put them under sanctions. But Sudan has been eternally under sanctions since the time of Omar al-Bashir. And they didn't move. They did whatever they wanted to do, supported by their different external forces. So we hope that there can be some breakthrough, but as I said, I am not optimistic.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Dan, Professor paints a very bleak picture when all the facts are lined up. When you have a situation where the principal players, one, don't really care, just like Prof has so very clearly explained, looking down on those purporting to want to intervene, and that's on the one hand. And then there are external parties to this. And as Prof has again explained, and I'm sure you know, you have to be very doubtful of, well, let me not say doubtful, at least you have to be looking very keenly to determine what exactly are the motives here.
The interest is
Yes.
critical.
So when we have that situation, there's the African Union, Prof just wiped it away, said as far as they are concerned over there, he would be very surprised if they have any relevancy whatsoever. And then there's also Nigeria. So he spoke about leverage. Who would have leverage, in your estimation, in a situation like this that they would have to listen to?
Well, it's really very doubtful if there's any that we can talk about that will have that leverage that they will listen to. Essentially, consider the fact that they are not just doing this on their own. The external factors are actually very germane to this particular situation. You know, a number of times you find out that a lot of the crises we experience in Africa are actually motivated, you know, and perhaps sponsored from the outside.
Yes.
You know, because of the kind of interest they have in Africa. Unfortunately, they will always find a ready market for that, because the way and manner we run our affairs gives a lot of room for such things to thrive. That is why you find those forces coming surreptitiously, penetrating in a manner that either we understand or we pretend not to understand, or whichever, and they go so deep to the extent of causing this kind of level of damage. So in terms of who has a leverage that these people will be able, I doubt if there's any, but then it's not enough to say we should not make efforts, because efforts have to be made.
Yes.
If efforts were made to the extent of saying that let there be some level of ceasefire for
Humanitarian purposes, so that people can be...
That might just create the leeway for people to begin to approach the issue of, you know, ceasefire politically as well. You know, but again, when you look at almost all the African countries, which one is actually well governed that does not have issues of this kind? Because the one who is not in power, that is accusing the one in power as being corrupt, a thief, is only a thief in the waiting, you know, for an opportunity to do the same. And almost everything is the same. So for you to now, it's like a kettle calling a pot black, you know. When you come and say, okay, this thing, you should get to this level, and they look at where you are coming from, the same questions are there. They'll be wondering why not take time to actually take care of yourself before think about the others. But what is critical now is that there are other nationals that are in Sudan. And that one is very important, because that alone can create even a greater, you know, chaotic situation. And that is the more reason why they have to listen. And that is the more reason why the rest of Africa have to stand up to the occasion.
Yes.
We must rise up to the occasion and see how we can address this challenge. See how we can bring them to, you know, a round table, have a discussion. Obviously, it's always a give and take arrangement, because That's why I was asking you which one is national, which one is a rebel group. Because at the end of the day, even if one has actually risen as a rebel group, are they foreigners? They have an interest. They have a stake.
And when we're talking about interest here,
yes.
America, I don't know how the extent to which America is involved in all of this, but as you know, America likes to see itself as the policeman of the world from time to time.
Yes.
And then there's Putin's Russia, just waiting and watching everything very, very carefully. And he's always going to be a counterbalance.
At some time, the challenge you have with the police is that the police will be the one setting up the crisis and only to come in. So it becomes very challenging.
This is it.
Who is actually policing what now in this case? Because they all have their interests. They won't go into any arena of this kind for your own sake. It's always for their own interest. So whatever they will do, either for ceasefire or to even fuel the situation the more, it's always about their interest. Interest is critical. This time around, the two groups that are fighting, whose interests are they fighting to protect?
Well,
are they from foreign land? They are all from the same Sudan.
I think
that is why it will even be easier to strike a chord and say, okay, we are, look at it. This situation of democracy we'll keep talking about, where somebody will emerge out of maybe 100%, you get 55%, and you consider the 45 useless, will always create problem for us. You see, there are people who have the temperament to stomach such things, who can work with it. But a scenario where you just import things and think that it will work for every environment is really something that we need to interrogate seriously. We need to look at it. That is why all interests must be taken care of. Nobody is more Sudanese than the other. None. And interestingly, it was the former president that created the one that is now seen to be more like a rebel group or something. And the other was already a standing army that was there, out of which you created this and trained and empowered them. So they are all empowered. So they have capacity to unleash values, and that's what we are seeing today. What is now critical is how to harness these energies and see how we can manage in a manner that will be profitable to the state and to the rest of the African continent. I think that's just where we need to...
Because it's a very complex issue.
Indeed, it is.
In between what you said and the background that Prof gave,
yes.
And, the South Sudan has always been looked down upon. Now they've gone their way, and they're facing up to, whatever it is.
And this thing is equally going to spiral. The effect will surely... They can't run away from it. They just cannot run. Even the humanitarian crisis alone is a huge challenge.
Exactly.
It's a huge challenge. And all the surrounding countries are going to suffer. If the other time our own president, Muhammadu Buhari, made, was that an allegation or what? That a lot of the crises we are having, the attacks, it was actually from Libya, a spillover of Libya's situation. If all the way from Libya will be suffering it here, how do you imagine the surrounding states to Sudan? So it's a very, I'm telling you,
it's a very, very serious situation, and as a prof has also explained, it's complex. There are interests at play here, external interests, and then in Sudan they do things differently. Maybe our worldview is such as it is. We are coming from the colonial era, the British and all of that. I don't know the extent to which they imbibed any of that. They're mostly, I would guess, they're mostly Islamic. It's mostly an Islamic nation. So I imagine that the whole narration might well be different, Prof. Is that indeed the case? Very briefly, before we go on break, is that part of the complication of the issue that worldviews differ?
I think the problem is much more complex than, yes, a sizable portion of the country is Arab, is Islamic. But we must understand that this was a territory that was totally part of the Egypt at some point, part of British colonialism at some point. The independence of Sudan came out of the British granting it The problem is complex.
All right. You know what, Prof? I beg your pardon. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Prof. The problem is complex, and so you just had a few seconds. What I'm going to do, sir, is take a break, come back, and so you can continue on the complexity of the situation the world is facing in Sudan. So please stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Our guest this morning, Professor Babafemi Badejo, used to be with the UN Mission in Darfur, Sudan, and we also have in studio that the professor is joining us, remotely, and we have in studio Dr. Dan Ekere of the Philosophy Department of the University of Lagos. And just before we went on break, Professor Badejo was explaining it's a very complex issue. And I had asked if it was a matter of interest, and he said it's, external interest is one thing, but perhaps it's a lot more complex than that. You were saying, Prof, before I had to go on break.
Well, I was just trying to point out that this is not the first time we are going to have conflicts on the continent of Africa. And normally at the beginning of every conflict, we get excited the way we are excited, talking and talking and talking. And nobody is saying we should do nothing. Of course, people will continue to try as we face what we call in peacemaking, forum shopping. Forum shopping meaning everybody wanting to appear to be helping, even enemies that want the crisis to continue will step into the frame and say that we want to help. When I was dealing with the situation of Darfur, not to talk about Somalia, that still continues since 1990, but we have now gotten used to the problems of Somalia that we hardly talk about it anymore. But in Darfur, it was very clear that as the United Nations and the African Union was putting every effort into trying to make peace with those that were tagged as rebel groups, and the UN wasn't used such terms for them. They were movements, and you find out that you want to reach an agreement with these people, they will still check with whoever their sponsors are. And in some situations, when you thought that you have an agreement, there was a case in which we, by accident, were listening to one of the warlords taking instruction from the principal, who I wouldn't mention, about the fact that a Nigerian was heading the mission, Dr. Martin Huomoibi. And we listened as they were talking on the phone and getting instruction. All that will be happening in this situation. Nobody is sitting on the fence. Russia is as much involved as China, even though the Chinese tend to be a little bit more quiet. But the Russian and the Americans with the UK, now you have the Quad. Yes. The Quad took them to Jeddah for this humanitarian negotiation. And the Quad is made up of UAE, Saudi Arabia, United States, and the UK. And then they had pushed aside the IGAD people, that African Union and its the chairman of the commission were supporting. And of course, when you don't have that unity of purpose by the different people who are wanting to negotiate this and negotiate that, you find that the combatants start doing forum shopping, and they make money from this forum shopping, even though I will not say the kind of money involved is of the magnitude that should let it continue. What tends to make it easy to end a conflict is when one is able to reasonably defeat the other at the war front, and as a result of such defeat, international assistance comes in by way of trying to assuage the egos of the one that has been defeated. Mm-hmm. In crisis that we've been able to solve, you go and look at Mozambique, go and look at Liberia, Zimbabwe, Liberia, Sierra Leone, some of those that have raged for long. Look at Cote d'Ivoire. It was when Gbagbo was driven out of town that Alassane Ouattara was able to come in and take charge, supported by ECOWAS and the rest of the world.
Okay. Excuse me, Prof. A viewer, as you know, our program is an interactive one. A viewer has called in. Mr. George, good morning to you, and apologies for keeping you waiting. Please go ahead now.
To that professor, Uncle Yori, I listened to the harrowing experiences relayed by some of the returnees. And the first thing that came to my mind was those who are drumming the beats of war in Nigeria. They should listen to those harrowing experiences. Just because they lost elections, they want Nigeria to go into war. They should listen to these people or probably talk to those who witnessed the Biafran war. This is not a full-blown war. It's not yet a full-blown war, and you can see casualties and experiences of people. So the lesson is that war is not a good situation, and it's not something any right-thinking person should be promoting. I want to talk about the aspect of evacuation of Nigerians in situations like this, Uncle Yori, because I watched this one of the Sudanese situation, and I saw how the previous ones were handled. Abika of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, you saw how she has been handling this thing. She handled the one of Ukraine seamlessly. But this of Sudan, the government involved so many agencies, NEMA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then so many like that, emergency ministry and all the rest. She wasn't given the free hand to handle it. That's why you saw all those costs that came up. I think it should be clearly defined. In situations like this, let that lady handle the thing and let it be as seamless as possible. It's just a recommendation.
Well,
good morning.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. George. Fine morning to you. Let me return to you briefly, Prof, before I ask Dr. Ekere another question. Because of the suggestion made by that caller, Mr. George, who called in from Lagos, noticing that from his summary, there was a difference. He felt that the Diaspora Commission was very much on top of their game in the case of Ukraine and receiving back our nationals. But here, he opined that there were other agencies interfering and probably making matters not as smooth as they might have been. I think I'm asking for your impression on that question.
Well, it is always very well said that too many cooks spoil the broth. And in our situation, I don't think that it is for the goodness of the nation that we have all these people who are involved in trying to solve a problem. Why do we have an ambassador? The foreign ministry deals with external affairs of the country, and when necessary, you immediately second people, our Air Force, humanitarian people, and all the rest of it to assist the ambassador, alert the neighboring embassies, and everything will be done. But the ambassador himself was crying. I don't know if you saw the video, the audio that he put out, trying to plead with the students not to target his staff or himself because he is as stranded as they are, because the madam of the, you remember that madam, when they took away the humanitarian affairs from Shimbaju and created the place for madam, the madam and the NEMA awarded the contracts for the buses from Abuja. The ambassador put that on the line. He told all of us that he's knowing nothing about it. So if buses are stopping in the desert and saying they are not paid, then you know where the problem is coming from. But we never want to talk about some of these things. I don't think that you should be appointing ambassadors into countries if you are going to create other people who are going to be controlling what they are doing. It never works.
Okay. Okay. One moment.
Whether
Yes.
Abike Dabiri or
Yes.
whoever.
Okay. Dan, would you like to weigh in on this matter?
Yeah.
Because as Prof said, too many cooks can indeed spoil the broth.
Exactly. And truly, you begin to ask, what exactly is the role of, the foreign ministry, who that is superintends, over the affairs of all the, foreign bodies. We have an ambassador in Sudan. What is his role? What should be his responsibility in times like this? So all of that need to be factored into this. And I think that it's a function of how, they assign roles that will create the problem that we now experience. But again, the call the caller made that there is war somewhere will not stop, or war from coming. That, criminals are being killed does not mean people will not commit crime. What matters really is how people deal with people. Particularly, it is a question of how governments perform in their various domains, because that will create room either for people to become criminally minded or become loyal to the state. So we must begin to address the issue of governance very seriously, because until that is done, if you like, in China, where they even kill people for crime, whatever, it has not stopped. They are so criminally minded.
Yes.
So it doesn't stop it, really.
Yes. But so the big danger now, as Professor Badejo said earlier, was that we're looking at a possible failure of the state here.
Exactly.
If we're not careful. Mazi Okoroafo in Arochukwu, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, our guest.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Honestly, the federal government made a mistake right from the word go. Crisis upon crisis in Sudan was to be solved by the ambassador in Sudan, not minister or DG or anything in Nigeria. The ambassador in Sudan knows the territory or the environment that's supposed to do and what to do. That is what made the federal government play the guy from the first go. Now, do you know, are you aware that those paramilitary guys support groups?
The RSS, the Rapid Support Front guys.
That came to fight in that Sudan. Two generals are fighting. What are they fighting? Because of oil blog. But the thing is that the kind of voice they are producing now will go to Africa after the crisis. So Africa, even the Arab world that is meeting in Saudi Arabia today, and US, they are going there for only humanitarian problem solving. That is all. But the main crisis, they are not discussing it, which is very, very detrimental to African Union. If African Union cannot use the opportunity and solve that problem there in Saudi Arabia, I bet you Africa is going to be created with those rebels in Sudan after the crisis. And that's whether the crisis will end in 3 months' time or 4 months' time. So Africa Union will solve the problem day or night. If they don't solve it, forget it. But all these things we are facing a very time bomb.
Okay, at least thank God that Mazi Okorafor got most of it out. Returning to you, Prof, you had explained how those people, the people in Sudan might be seen to be, some might see them as being disdainful of institutions like the African Union. But we can't just leave everything, and I understand it from the way you explained it, since it's all about leverage and what leverage does any of those people have. What has the African Union even done for the rest of Africa, in any case, might be the way that some might look at it. But as dire a situation as it is, it's scary, actually, because as both you gentlemen have also explained that it's not a matter of it might spread, it definitely will if care is not taken. Then people who are sitting down in the comfort of their sitting room watching television now and taking such a privilege for granted might actually find that, as the Yoruba people say, there is more than one world.
Well, you are very, very right. And I am not throwing out the role of the African Union, the United Nations, IGAD. All these are bound to be trying as best as possible. But a situation in which the two parties are being supported externally to continue waxing strong will not solve the problem. Perhaps it's to diplomatically be approaching the different powers that are supporting all this to reduce the inflow of arms and armaments into Sudan, to allow a situation where it becomes clearer for one side as not going to, right now, both sides still thinking that they can dislodge the other, and they are not going to give up until it is clear to one side that, wow, I am losing and now need. Like happened in Ethiopia, it was clear that the federal government had seriously dented the capacity of the Tigray government, and it was then possible to bring them together to negotiate the concerns of the Tigray people, the concerns of the federal government, in order to solve that problem.
Okay. Well, I beg your pardon, sir. Yet again, I beg your pardon. Yet again, I've got to interrupt you. Forgive me for doing so. SULAIMAN in Lagos. Good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. Good morning.
Yes. Thank you for calling in. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I thought the professor is just talking. Okay. Let me go ahead. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning, SULAIMAN. Do you have a question or an observation to make on the situation?
An observation as regards what you guys are talking about. First of all, what is happening in Sudan, I would like to say to Nigerians, hello?
We can hear you,
I
SULAIMAN.
would like to talk to Nigerians that what is happening in Sudan, if there is not taken, we pray that it should not happen in Nigeria. As regards the word they are talking about the election, this is just it's supposed to be showing what is happening in Sudan for Nigerians to be seen, so that people will just take good care of themselves, that we don't need war in Nigeria, we need peace. And secondly, as regards the ambassador appointment, they're supposed to pick the people that know about this job. They should not be saying that this is my political party member. Let's put technical people that knows about it. Like what they are saying that the ambassador was saying that they should not attack my family. I don't know anything about it. He's supposed to be in charge of this office. Not that they'll just go and bring someone that don't know anything about it and now be saying that I don't know anything about it. They're supposed to pick people that know about this job. Let's appoint technocrats, not people that is my party member, let's compensate him.
Okay.
We cannot move anywhere with that.
All right. Thank you.
That's my submission.
Thank you very much, SULAIMAN. So Dr. Ekere, I mean, clearly we can't just fold our arms. It looks like it's stacked against, against the purposes of peace. But nevertheless, we still have to move. And I'm happy that Prof said that, look, in spite of what he might have said in relation to other, that does not mean that he's throwing out entirely the UN, AU, and all of these people.
Yeah, that's the way it is. After all, what are they existing for? What are those bodies for? It's for days like this, things like this. They are to take care of situations of this kind, to even prevent. And now the thing has happened. They have to find a way of solving the problem. So we can't.
The Prof explained that it's easier for professionals to broker peace when it is clear that one side is weaker.
Exactly.
But right now, I think again, Prof suggested that which side is thinking that it can dislodge the other.
Exactly. But that will always, it's just like somebody going into a political contest. The assumption has always been that you will win. So everybody goes there with that air of, capacity to excel and all the rest. Until you are properly decimated to the point that you now begin to feel the effect, then you begin to listen to, a series of advice from here and there. Now, in this situation, but we can't continue, just watch and see and wait till one will be so decimated.
No.
To the point that it will begin to, in a way, look for an avenue to just come in for negotiation. Something has to be done.
Indeed.
Efforts have to be put in. This is the time for us to show that we actually, have strategies. The AU, the various countries of Africa, but I want to believe that some persons should actually provide some form of leadership beyond the issue of the, yes. Then the United Nations as well, what is it there for? Is it until the entire Sudan is wiped out before they will begin to intervene? So these are issues. And they know those external factors as well. So they need to do something about it.
Prof, finally now, what can Nigeria do in view of its, well, first of all, its position in Africa, and everybody looks towards Africa. There's no how anything is going on in Africa that you won't want Nigeria's opinion or input or concept of the whole matter. But now, in this juncture Nigeria is in, I don't know if it's similar. The Americans refer to this kind of a juncture as a lame duck. They refer to presidents as lame ducks. Is President Buhari, in that sense, a lame duck, not being able to contribute to this because he's out of here by the 29th? Is Nigeria really weak in what it can do, and the president-elect cannot really begin to, speak like a president yet until? So, where is Nigeria in all of this?
I want to say to my friend that I'm not saying do nothing, but I'm just pointing out realistically. Of course, there is always it's possible to keep having activities without action.
Yes,
that's not that's normal, and it is done. The African Union chairman can make statements and say that we are speaking to them, we are talking to them, even if he's not talking to them. That's okay. That's okay. Those kind of things can continue.
Oh dear.
But with respect to the question you asked, Nigeria became irrelevant long ago. We are not talking about Nigeria of the time of Murtala Muhammad, Olusegun Obasanjo, and then we can go further back, and then the attempt of Olusegun Obasanjo again coming in, trying to make Nigeria a bit more relevant again. I don't think that we have the clout internationally that Nigeria continues to dream about. Those days when they will send messages to go, but okay, whether the incoming president is going to do that, I don't know, because the incoming president has not shown a lot of appetite for foreign policy either in his campaign or his disposition so far. But all that may change by the time he sees the reality and links some of that reality to his capacity to be able to achieve in Nigeria. So maybe he will be able to do some of that.
Maybe.
But yes,
we're going to have to leave it there, Prof. Forgive me, Prof. I've been so rude this morning, always butting in, but forgive me. It's not me.
No problem. I can understand.
Yes. So I want to thank you. We're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank you very much. We leave it on that maybe note. And it's interesting that the Prof pointed out that, well, the president-elect, as far as he's been able to observe, hasn't shown much appetite for, foreign policy yet. But maybe all of that will change once it's sworn in. He won't have a choice. Thank you very much, Professor Babafemi Badejo, formerly of the UN Mission in Darfur, and also appreciation to you, Dr. Dan Ekere, lecturer, Philosophy Department, University of Lagos.
Thank you.
That's our program today. Please join us tomorrow for a fresh edition. I am Yori Polarin. Bye-bye for now.